Welcome back to Fast Market on the Schwab Network. I'm Diane King Hall alongside Tom White in our Chicago studio. Time now for our cash tag segment. For that, we want to bring in our next guest, and that's Megan Brantley, Vice President of Research like Folio. Megan, thank you for joining us this Friday. Happy Friday to you. We know you have new sentiment data on Amazon, and it comes on the heels of their big Prime Days events, which I think it was Landon who pointed this out, is turning out to be like a quarterly event almost. I can't remember if it was Landon who pointed that out, right? But it's more frequent than what it used to be. So I'm curious to know, I wonder if some of the novelty wore off. I know you look across web visits. What does your data look like now?
Yeah, I think that you make a great point. I remember whenever Prime Day first launched, it was a big summer event and it was this new novel idea, like Christmas in July or June or whatnot. And now they added an event in October, and this proved really strategic. And now this has kind of really shifted even holiday shopping forward. When we look in our data of people who are talking about purchasing things, I think about a third of them are talking about buying holiday gifts early. So I think that this is brilliant from Amazon to be able to create its own little shopping quarterly holidays for consumers. But when we look at this event that we saw this last week isn't as big as that annual summer event. That's still its staple retail event. But you can see we do see some nice trends. The search interest. And so this is for a lot of different queries, whether somebody's just searching Amazon Prime, whether they're searching Prime deals. And it's up about 12% on a year-over-year basis from last year's October event. And so this is a nice little indicator of consumer demand, consumer resilience, and also a bit of that pull forward effect. We saw a lot of consumers who were talking about buying essentials, but then also some household goods, some beauty. So some splurges in there too. And definitely, like I mentioned, those holiday gifts. And so I think at large, this is a win for Amazon whenever you're heading into this holiday season. And another kind of indicator too for us is that sentiment gauge. And we do see improved sentiment this year. So that perception of, did I actually receive a deal, seemed to resonate a bit more with consumers. And it could just be, the environment that we're in where prices feel a bit heavier, prices feel a bit higher, and consumers are appreciative whenever they think that they find something at a reasonable price and Amazon's delivering there. So I think that that's probably the best bit of news, at least in this week, that's been top of mind in our research desk when we're looking at these consumer mentions, where we're looking at web traffic. We saw a nice pop. And so it's good to see that for Amazon, definitely taking advantage of that this year. Because when you look at this chart, you can see this is the overall web visits for all of Amazon. And Amazon is a monster, right? We've got not only just the Prime, but also its growing cloud segment. And you can see those mentions are flattening out a little bit. And so this is something that really in our data is being pulled down by those overarching AWS mentions. And we can get into that next. But I think certainly a highlight for Amazon, at least of late, is definitely some nice retail traction.
Retail exhaustion. These things I get popping up in my inbox. It seems like every other month about Prime Days. There's some data already out that the cart size that they're checking out with have pulled back from those July levels during their 4-day event, Megan, on the retail side. But we all know the profitability for Amazon comes from their cloud business, and 17.5% growth last quarter from year-ago levels. It's pretty good. But then you look at their competitors, Microsoft and Google Cloud, they're up just under 30% and just over 30% as far as growth rates there. Is that a concern, that you guys see out of your data?
I would say that's certainly the weak spot in our data when it comes to Amazon. And it's why whenever you look at that overarching, web visits versus stock chart, you're starting to see a little bit of divergence, because that growth in AWS, while it's still positive, like you mentioned, 17.5% last quarter, it's starting to slow down and it's starting to moderate. And that's really what our data is starting to pick up on. It has picked up on for some time. When you compare it versus Microsoft's Azure versus the Google Cloud platform, we start to see some divergence, some really surprising data out of Google. Google had a really nice quarter last quarter with its cloud growth. I think that it ended up topping about $13 billion. And we saw Amazon, just for scale, though, you look at this chart and it looks kind of alarming because you see Google with this massive growth, and then you have Amazon on the flip side. And part of this has to do with just where the overall market and pie is. I think that last quarter, Amazon's cloud revenue was upwards of 30 billion. So Google's is still very small in comparison. And when we look at overall consumer mind share, if I were to plot all of these on a pie chart, Amazon would command over 60% of that cloud mind share. So it's still the biggest player, but its dominance is shrinking. And we really see Google being the player here, at least in the near term, that's stepping up and kind of inching away at a little bit of that market share dominance that Amazon has. And so something to watch moving forward. I think just to give scale for the slowdown in growth, what fiscal year 2024 cloud revenue growth was around 19% for Amazon, slipped to about 17.5%. So we're watching this moving forward. But so far, our big story takeaway is it looks like Google's doing very, very well here.
So I want to dig into the comparison a little bit more, because Amazon, listen, has been a underperformer within the Mag 7 year to date, especially if you compare it to Alphabet, Google, or Microsoft, among essentially the whole group. There was this view, and I've heard from different analysts who they thought that Prime Days might be a catalyst, this most recent run of Prime Days. But I don't know, because, you wonder in terms of the trends that you see, did it pull forward something from Black Friday, or did some consumers just not even, shop their baskets? Did they leave their baskets? For instance, I went to check the deals and I was like, I'll wait for Black Friday. What does your data show?
Yeah, I think that that's something that we'll need to watch to see how demand continues to play out this holiday season. We do see this traction in terms of, holiday shopping visits looks almost exactly in line with what we saw last year. So it's not like we're tracking more consumers who are shopping early this year. That would suggest potentially more of a pull forward effect, but I think it's really valid and something to keep an eye on, because you may have that, or you may have abandoned carts, as you mentioned. But at large in our data, it is nice to see that pop. I was actually surprised. I was kind of expecting, as Tom mentioned, that retail fatigue of consumers being tired and saying, oh my goodness, here is this another deal that's being pushed in my inbox. But we actually saw consumers seeking out those deals, and a little bit better reception among consumers, especially from a sentiment perspective, that was shocking even to our team. So I think that this event was still overall positive for Amazon, but it'll be really important to monitor into the holiday season to see if that was more significant of a pull forward effect than we're currently measuring. It's still really early to tell, though.
Megan, I kind of wanted to hit on that one chart with the web visits versus the stock price. The stock price has been underperforming lately. We're basically flat on the year. As far as like an earnings score that you guys would have right now, it doesn't feel like momentum's in Amazon's favor. But I hear all these analysts say that, hey, Amazon's their top internet pick or their top tech pick for the year. Your thoughts?
I think that the bar is relatively low. As you mentioned, the stock is pretty flat year to date. And so the hurdle to clear seems a bit more reasonable versus other players in this big tech space. And another lever that we haven't really talked about that Amazon has done really well in is advertising. I think its advertising growth grew by 22% last quarter, and they're inking new deals with live sports. So you have the advertising lever within its Prime system, but then you also have the advertising lever on live sports. And that's something that I know that we've talked about a lot, where that really holds a lot of value with advertisers, because you have a captive audience who's actually watching an event live and who's actually, incentivized to stay and watch through something like that. And so I think that they just signed an NBA deal. So, Amazon is expanding its presence of live sports, and we continue to see ad dollars shift from this traditional linear TV to streaming TV, and now Amazon is taking a bigger chunk of that. So the good news for Amazon is it has other growth levers beyond just cloud to kind of help balance out a little bit of that loss of momentum that we're recording, whether it's a stronger than expected Prime event and holiday shopping, or growth in advertising. So I would say we lean a bit positive, but definitely some reasons to be cautious whenever you look at that cloud growth. We haven't necessarily seen that momentum slow down on our end quite yet.
All right, we will leave our conversation there for today. Great insight, great perspective. That's Megan Brantley, Vice President of Research for Likefolio.